Alright, so in this video we're going to be going over Chapter 10, Departure, as the Cornelians are going to go back to Rome. And as per usual, you'll have 5 or so items that you will input into Canvas, receiving credit for having watched this video, so that you can perhaps replace a missing M that you have if you had not made the Chapter 10 recording. So, let's go ahead and get started. Interia, new word in this chapter, meanwhile. In the country house, but it's the Corneliana country house. What we can do in Latin is that we can take an adjective, or I should say take a noun, and if we add to it the suffix anus if it's masculine, ana if it's feminine, or sometimes inus if it's masculine, or ina, it will then mean related to that thing. So for example, if you have related to the Cornelians, thus it is Cornelian. Likewise, if you were to take the word for dog, which is canis, the word that then you can create, taking off that fake ending, would be caninus. And that's where we get the English word canine. Canine means related to a dog. And so therefore, here we have the Cornelian country house. So meanwhile, in the Cornelian country house, all the masculine or feminine ones are working strenuously, telling me that it's most likely omnes, referring to people, or at least to something masculine or feminine. Or things, I should say. Aurelia wears, Gerrit, her tunica, and her stola, and her palla. And so we have a polysyndeton individualizing each item that she is wearing. She orders, you bet, the slave lady to place other tunicas and stolas and pallas in plus accusative into the suitcase, or the trunk, if you would like. Marcus et sextus tunicas et togas praetextas gerunt. Same word, gerit, gerunt, and then we see it as the infinitive, wear. So Marcus and Sextus, they wear tunicas, and remember it would be tunica laticlavia, that would have the purple stripes on either shoulder going down, indicating they're the senatorial class, and toga praetextas, which is the toga with a purple border. Children, those with imperium in the Roman government, consuls and praetors, not senators, but consuls and praetors, would wear the toga praetexta. So, because they're children, they wear tunica laticlavias and toga praetextas because on a journey and in the city, i.e. public, the children, literally the free ones, are accustomed to wear toga praetextas. As we talked about in class, you do not usually wear to school the same sorts of things all the time that you would wear in the privacy of your own home. And that brings us to our first word that you see, gerere, on line 4, second word, gerere, G-E-R-E-R-E. That's your first word. Servus, a slave places, puts other tunicas and toga praetextas in plus accusative into the suitcase. In cubiculo Gaii, in Gaius's bedroom, or in the bedroom of Gaius, genitive case showing possession, a slave puts manly togas. Because he is not a consul or a praetor who has imperium, he doesn't wear the toga praetexta. He wears manly togas. So a slave places manly togas into the suitcase because Gaius, in the city, i.e. public, is accustomed to wear a manly toga. Gaius himself, induit, puts on a manly toga. Then we encounter Davus, remember, the Wheelicus, the second in charge over the whole farm. Davus, who himself takes care of all things. Now, compare that to what we had seen earlier. Scroll down. Here, omnes was nominative or accusative, masculine or feminine. Here, nominative, because it is the subject. But because it is omnia, it's nominative or accusative, neuter. And so, all people, all things. And here it's the accusative all things, because it's the direct object of what he takes care of. So, Davus, who himself takes care of all neuter, plural, accusative things, stands at the door. He orders the slaves to carry, portare, suitcases out of the bedrooms in plus accusative into the road. He holds a stick and he shouts, agite, drive on, te, because it is command to more than one. And so he says, drive on, wicked slaves, in the vocative plural, because the vocative almost always looks the same as the nominative, except in second declension singular when the noun ends with a us. Drive on, wicked slaves, asking the question, nay, Do y'all sleep? Are y'all sleeping? We leave, discadimus, we depart today, not tomorrow. Hodie non cras. And so therefore, cras is that word from which we get, of course, the English word procrastinate, put off something until tomorrow. And that is your second word, cras, C-R-A-S. Marcus quoque servos incitat. Marcus also spurs on, drives on, incites the slaves, and he orders them to place the suitcases in plus accusative into the minivan. It's a carriage, but for our own understanding, in the modern sense, we would ride around in a minivan. Servus quidam, a certain slave by the name Geta. Now Geta is different because he is a first declension masculine noun, but has first declension forms. There are very few, and his name is a proper noun that is one of them. First declension masculine, not that many of them at all. So a certain slave by the name Geta grabs the suitcase of Sextus, or Sextus's suitcase, and throws it, in plus accusative, into the minivan. Kawe Geta, take care, as a command. Kawere would be the verb, and then to make the imperative, just take off the R-E. Take care, Geta. Be careful, Geta. Sextus, the worried one, shouts out. We would say Sextus shouts out worriedly, but in Latin that would require the US to be taken off and the long E of an adverb. And so, as usual, Latin prefers a nominative adjective modifying the subject, whereas we would prefer the adverb, but it's the same effect. Take care of, again, the infinitive, dropping the R-E as a command. Take care of my suitcase. Don't throw it. Again, to make a negative command, it'll be a noli and nolite plus an infinitive. And that brings us to our third word, noli, that you see right there. N-O-L-I, with which will be paired an infinitive in order to make a negative command. Your third word again, noli, N-O-L-I. At last, all the suitcases are in the minivan. Not into, that would be in plus accusative, but here in plus an ablative form. And so, here you can see that ones is feminine. How do I know? Because it's modifying the feminine suitcases. It's also plural because of the form, and you also know it's nominative, not accusative with that long es because of its modification. For an adjective to modify a noun, it has to have the same case, number, and gender. Ascain did Marcus et Sextus, Marcus and Sextus climb in. Ascain did Euclides, Euclides climbs in. Ascain did Aurelia, Aurelia climbs in. And again, tricolon crescanes with an anaphora. Climbs in, and climbs in. Now, we meet a new slave at this moment in the household of the Cornelians, and that is, perhaps, their most valued slave, as he is the greatest skills. He is an educated slave from Greek named Euclides, and remember, he shares his name with the father of geometry. Geometry that we study, which is two-dimensional in school, is going to be known as Euclidean geometry. He did Euclid, or Euclides, if you would like to call it, with the same name as our slave that we have here, a work known as the Elements, and in the Elements, the laws of geometry, which are known as postulates. And so he is going to be coming along as the role as the tutor of the children. And he is actually our fourth and next word, Euclides. E-U-C-L-E-I-D-E-S. Make sure you spell it correctly, but that's the first word that you're going to be putting in. Gaius ipse. Gaius himself is prepared, is ready to climb in. Cyrus, now we meet a new slave, and thus we have, for him, an appositive, a word that renames another word, giving us more information about it, and thus we learned he is the chauffeur, the guy who drives the rida. So the rida is the minivan, the ridarius is the minivan driver. So Cyrus, the minivan driver, also climbs in, and he prepares to incite the horses. Subito exclamat Aurelia. Suddenly Aurelia shouts out, Ubi est Cornelia? Where is Cornelia? By, with, because of, from, in, on, at, which is the way that you translate ablatives, that time itself, Cornelia runs into the road. Gaius orders her immediately to climb into the minivan. Remember that she was over at Flavia's house trying to say goodbyes. Statim ridarius, equos incitat. Immediately the minivan driver urges on the horses. The many people named Cornelius, thus we call them the Cornelii or the Cornelians, they go away, they depart, they leave. Now I'd like to point out one word before we draw this to an end, and that is the word ipso. Ipso can have as a definition lots and lots and lots of things. It could mean myself, yourself, himself, or itself. And that's only in the singular. If it were modifying something plural, it could be ourselves, yourselves, or themselves. You will know by what it's modifying. Since it is modifying time, we know that it's an itself because time is an it. If it were modifying, let's say, Marco, it would be Marcus himself, and thus that we know is the correct translation for it. And then finally, that's our last word, ipso. I-P-S-O. So, make sure you put in all of those items, and hopefully you will receive credit for having watched the translation of Chapter 10.